Hello there. Thanks for tuning in to your favorite news destination. You're watching In Your Interest with me, Kabir Naqvi. We've got two focused segments for you. First up, about that shocking case that's come to light from one of the biggest corporate names in the country, and it's raising some very, very uncomfortable questions. The second one is, of course, the Noida workers' revolt. The roads were completely jam-packed, and what went wrong? It's a systemic failure? Is it a corporate failure? We'll answer all those questions, but before that, the top headlines we're tracking for you. The TCS Nashik horror exposed, 7 arrested, 9 cases filed over alleged sexual harassment and religious conversion. The TCS has suspended the accused employees and also issued a statement. But what went wrong? And the big question, is there a larger organized rubric at play? We'll decode that. The Noida workers' protest, it turned violent over salary demands. The Uttar Pradesh government has now formed a high-level committee to restore order. Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath has called the unrest a conspiracy. Coimbatore cable operator booked for illegal telecast of Vijay starrer Jananayagan. Police seize hard disks and computer. Further investigations are underway, all ahead of crucial Tamil Nadu Assembly elections. European Union chief Ursula von der Leyen criticizes the Hormuz blockade, says the Strait of Hormuz closure is greatly damaging, stresses on freedom of navigation, which is of paramount importance. The West Asian war. Netanyahu reveals inside details of why Iran-US negotiations failed, says US could not tolerate Iran's blatant violation of agreement to negotiate. Meanwhile, US military begins maritime blockade of Iranian ports as Trump's Hormuz threat takes effect. Donald Trump warns ships in the blockade zone face interception and capture. First up, a disturbing case from inside a top corporate giant. We're talking about serious questions about safety, about power, about accountability. And let's try and decode how deep does this rot actually extend to. In Nashik, a major scandal has shaken the corporate world and left many people questioning the safety of workplaces at large. For years, the city of Nashik has been a growing hub for the IT and BPO sectors, promising thousands of young graduates a path to a better life. But behind the glass walls of a major facility in Nashik, a much darker reality was allegedly unfolding. At the TCS BPO center in Mumbai, Naka Satpur, 8 young women aged between 18 and 25, along with one man, have come forward with serious complaints of sexual harassment, molestation, and even rape under the false promise of marriage. The incidents are said to have taken place between 2022 and early 2026, almost about 4 years. And the accused are team leaders and HR staff. That's right, HR staff members who, according to the complaints, use their positions to target these vulnerable women employees. The first complaint was filed on March 25th this year. And within days, by the 3rd of April, police had registered 9 first information reports, 8 for sexual offences and 1 for hurting religious sentiments. And so far, 7 people have been arrested. The investigation and probe is on, including an HR executive named Nida Khan. One accused woman is still absconding. TCS has suspended all the accused employees and has stated that it has zero tolerance for such behavior. But the company says it is fully cooperating with the police, who have formed a special investigation team for this very case. But what makes this case even more disturbing is the undercover operation that helped expose it. For 40 days, 6 to 7 women police officers posed as regular employees at the BPO. They attended internal meetings and gathered direct evidence. Police say the probe has uncovered an organized large racket. The accused allegedly targeted young women right from the hiring stage. They used WhatsApp groups to build trust, keep track of targets, and of course pressure them into giving in. It's a classic case of grooming. The complaints speak of false promises of marriage, threats of losing jobs, even forcing women to change their religious practices. According to the complaints, here's where it gets dirtier. The accused, including Danish Sheikh, Tausi Fatar, and Raza Memon, created an environment of fear and coercion. In one instance, a victim alleges she was lured into a physical relationship under a false promise of marriage, whilst others describe being touched inappropriately and subjected to obscene remarks during official meetings. Perhaps most disturbing are the claims that HR manager Nida Khan and other senior staff ignored these pleas for help for years, effectively enabling the abuse to continue on.
Shocking incident has came to light in Nashik past 3 to 4 days. A very well-known company named TCS. यहाँ पे बहुत सारी लड़कियां हैं जो यहाँ पे काम करने के लिए आती थी, अपने करियर के लिए आ रही थी, पैसे कमाने के लिए आ रही थी, परंतु 3-4 साल से यहाँ पे धर्मांतर, यहाँ पे उनका लैंगिक शोषण, शारीरिक शोषण हो रहा था। उनको फोर्सफुली टिफिन में नॉनवेज लाने को बोलने वाले थे ये बैंक और जो भी इनके टीम लीडर्स थे, और उनको नमाज पढ़ने के लिए फोर्स किया गया। ये बड़े इंटरनेशनल कंपनी में आज ये सब चीजें हो रहे हैं, तो इसलिए कंपनी सेफ्टी, कंपनी रूल्स, HR पॉलिसीज कहाँ गई थी जब ये सब चीजें यहाँ पे हो रही थी।
टीसीएस जैसे कंपनी है, उसमें कई युवा लड़के लड़कियां काम करती है, और वहाँ पे जिस तरह से यह हादसा हुआ है, ये घटना घटी है, बहुत शर्मनाक है। माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी ने, सरकार ने गंभीरता से इस बात को लिया है, और इसके सिवा भी और कई जगह मुझे ऐसा लगता है इसकी जांच होनी चाहिए। बहुत सारी कंपनियां नासिक में है जहाँ पर बहुत लड़के लड़कियां काम करती है।
An esteemed set of panelists waiting right on the other side, and the big questions that we're asking: how did a multinational with an ICC miss years of alleged abuse by multiple supervisors? Does special investigation team evidence indicate a wider organized network targeting vulnerable hires? Will this case drive real BPO safety reforms or fade as another headline? And much more. PK Jain, former ADGP Maharashtra, with us on the broadcast. Dr. Nisha Nujumuddin, women's rights and public policy analyst, many thanks for taking out the time. And Dr. Kiranpreet Kaur, human resources expert and advisor, the human capital, with us on the broadcast. So essentially, all areas and aspects are going to be covered. But, ADGP Jain, let me begin the snowball with you. We're seeing allegations of grooming. There were clear-cut WhatsApp groups, prolonged exploitation for years on end. And of course, the HR seems to be involved here as well. Collectively, our heads should again hang in shame. But based on your experience of handling such kind of complex cases, how do investigators in this particular case establish the intent, the pattern of the cases? We're learning about 40 days, 6 to 7 women cops went undercover. Do these patterns point to isolated misconduct, or from your understanding and your assessment, your reading, this is a larger network at play? ADGP.
Good evening, Kabir. Thank you very much for having me here. The case probably lingered on, and it was not registered with the police because practically nobody came forward.
Yep.
And when the affected persons, they came forward, I think their versions were verified by sending the lady police constables in decoy. And then only once it was established that yes, there was a pattern to the actions within the company, then the offenses were registered. And not one, not two, 9 offenses were registered of all sexual harassment, of hurting their religious sentiments, forcing them to adopt a particular religion, or maybe making them eat non-vegetarian food, etc. etc. There are a whole lot of charges are there, and it is the media reports say that there are about 50 persons affected in this entire series of events. But as far as my take on the matter is that once a case has been registered, the investigation will take place, the evidence will be collected as to what exactly happened. What a lot of human statements, the human intelligence, human statements, persons affected, their statement, their colleague's statement, everything will be taken into consideration. Now, it is also said that they had raised the matter with the HR department, whether it was in writing by way of a mail. All that becomes a part of the evidence that will be collected, and these persons who are accused in this case, they will be booked. And government of Maharashtra has recently enacted an ordinance in which they have the Religious Freedom Act, Freedom of Religion Act, 2026, where the sections are very, very stringent. But fortunately or unfortunately, all these cases have taken place before this particular enactment was made, and that's why they'll be out of the purview of this very stringent act.
Okay.
In a company like TCS,
Yeah.
if this can happen in a company like TCS, where there are large number of women employees,
Yeah.
one can only imagine as to what kind of hearing would be given to the posh cases in, the sexual harassment at workplaces in other smaller companies. Most of the employees are scared of losing their job, and that's why probably they went ahead with this kind of an harassment. And now the law will take its own course. The people, I'm sure that they are in for big trouble. One thing more I would like to comment here is that this is coming out like a pattern. If educated persons, I can understand an uneducated person, a crude person in the society resorting to this kind of a tactics, or maybe some hardcore religious Maulvi indulging into this kind of practices, which are now being thrown up all over the country. Here we have educated youth who are trying to subvert the system, who are trying to harass their colleagues, and who are trying to forcibly convert them to a particular religion, which is simply not done. I think the legal action taken in this matter should be very, very strict, very stern. Now, henceforth, it will be stern because the law does give you that kind of a leverage. But even in the current cases where the sections of BNS have been applied, I'm sure that they will make an example out of such cases.
All right, many thanks, ADGP, for your opening submission. I mean, of course, it's gut-wrenching, it's abhorrent, it's cruel with what's taking place at TCS. And you've raised a very an important question. Dr. Kiranpreet Kaur, human resource expert, with us on the broadcast. TCS claims here, Dr. Kaur, that there was zero tolerance, and it says that it has acted on swiftly. But if complaints dated back years, 2022 to now 2026, that's almost about 4 years. Is this a failure of internal system, isn't it? If this happened in a top IT firm, just like ADGP was telling us, how safe are India's workplaces really for young women trying to make a career for themselves?
Very well said, Kabir. I think it clearly tells us that global presence does not eliminate the local realities, which is social power dynamics that still influence the workplaces. And while TCS claims that it has a zero tolerance policy, I'm still not clear with the execution fidelity at the ground level, because if the gap exists, this is only bound to happen, because awareness is one thing and actual understanding and the speed of response and whether the investigation is perceived neutrally or, with a preconceived notion, all of this makes all the difference. And immediate acknowledgement of complaints becomes the first part of action, which is protection, against any kind of retaliation of an unbiased inquiry process. So HR credibility completely depends on consistency, not bases the hierarchy, bases the region or the business pressure. And especially when team leaders who are the first line of culture enforcement, it is very disturbing to, miss out the early warning signs, which is,
You're absolutely right. Dr. Kaur, your verbiage, it resonates with what, psychology students call organizational behavior. This alleged misconduct continued for 2 to 3 years. This is the top MNC, like we've already established. Talk to us about the key gaps, the gaps that have been exposed in this human resource oversight, the internal audits. What led to the brewing of this entire grooming scandal at large?
I think it's more than the HR failure. It is a systematic gap across levels. It seems like, from policy to leadership behavior to employee trust. All of this, together has played a role, and that is why it has taken this long period, because reporting directly is linked to psychological safety and trust, which somewhere is missing, and therefore, it took years to come out. But I feel the action must be firm and procedurally correct, and undue any pressure should not deviate the standard process, and I think cannot compromise on both justice and legal standing here.
Yep.
So any organization, I feel, should ensure that it's a time-bound investigation, transparent and confidential, and POSH must be taken very, very seriously, and a rerun, targeted POSH and leadership sensitization, I think, immediately should
You're
happen.
absolutely right. It's not a measure of compliance for these big companies. It has to act inside those corporate setups as well. Dr. Najumuddin, let me come to you. Victims say the complaints were made earlier, but they were completely ignored. The key gaps have been highlighted. The modus operandi has been spoken about by the ADGP. But, when we talk about crime versus conspiracy, victims are saying the complaints were made, nothing happened. This is a clear violation of the POSH Act. Help the viewers understand what kind of legal liability now does the company face, TCS. It's a big brand, it's a big company, there's a lot of money involved, and this can very quietly and quickly be pushed under the rug as well.
So here we need to understand the fact that whether India's workplace is truly safe, or are our systems failing silently. Now, this is totally evidence, a very clear evidence of the fact that the system is actually collapsing and the workplace safety is also at stake. Now, the victims, when we were talking about the victims here, victims are actually trapped in fear, in career insecurity, and they also face a great psychological pressure. And now, when you talk about the legal point of view, there is a legal and a policy breakdown as well, because we have already done the violation of the POSH Act of 2013, and the IPC provisions on harassment, the coercion, and even the ICC, that is the Internal Complaints Committee as well. So this shows that in spite of having all this, either it is proven to be ineffective, or they are either inactive is what is there. So law exists, but the implementation part in a very effective way is missing, is what I would say. And now, in spite of the victim being complaint also, the HR failure is a big question here. When the HR is failing, that is equal to the institutional failure, because the complaints were illegally ignored, and when the HR is failing to primarily carry forward the duty of protection, automatically it is actually posing a question that the silence of HR is actually louder than the crime itself. Now, here the women are also involved. Again, automatically, this is actually preventing the women workforce also from coming forward and working in such corporate environments. Now, when you talk about from economic and a corporate impact also, this is actually causing a huge damage with regard to the reputation of India's IT sector as a whole. And the women workforce participation, that also suffers greatly. And we know that in our country, India, the women workforce participation is much lesser compared to the male. So when such kind of instance happens, we're discouraging our other gender to come up again. And now again, with regard to corporate governance, there arises a trust deficit as well. Because unsafe, workplaces are actually bad economies, and they're not just bad ethics. This is something which we need to understand. So what I would suggest, again, apart from being a women activist, as a public policy expert, a couple of suggestions which I would say, a policy recommendation is that one is to make the POSH, what we have, truly, truly independent. And the external third-party ICC members are very, very mandatory. And now there should be an annual independent POSH audit, because, when internal committee cannot deliver external justice, we can have all this, nothing wrong in that. And there should also be a safe and anonymous reporting system as well. Today we are in the age of AI, so AI-based complaint portals can be there. There can be direct escalation to external ombudsman as well.
No, you're right, Dr. Najumuddin. I think more than AI, there needs to be, a human audit here. There needs to be a human touch when it comes to these kind of sensitive cases. Depending completely on AI here, in my personal purview, is not going to be the right decision. But I could be wrong. I'm not the HR expert here. But what's important at this point in time is, of course, the fact that we need to make sure that protections must be in place so as to make sure that we prevent further silences. People should still come out and be able to talk about it. And I think we're going to go to Dr. Kaur on that right after I take this next question with ADGP. ADGP, I don't mean to put you on a spot here, but it seems like politics is running a little ahead of the facts. This is being called corporate jihad. I mean, there is criminal misconduct. It's clearly a criminal case, but then this is being called a corporate jihad, the larger rubric that's at play. So how does this now affect society? How should we be consuming this particularly? Because I did want to understand the central agencies have shown great interest in this. The NIA, the ATS, the IB, they're all heavily involved. The SIT has to directly report with the details to these central agencies. But Are we not running a little ahead of the facts when it comes to politicizing the entire issue, calling it corporate jihad? Of course, there is one community that's involved. The names of the accused and the arrested will certainly paint a different picture. How important is it to go about this sensitively so that there is justice for the victims of this case, but not to run ahead of the facts when we're talking about politics of the state?
See, Kabir, when this entire business of terrorism started, we used to have very low-level players, very uneducated, illiterate people who were probably at the hem of the things. Then gradually it came down, it came up to matriculates and semi-literate people. Then it graduates. Then it was Unani doctors. So the lot of these disruptive activities in the country have been spearheaded by gradually moving up the ladder in terms of the education scale.
Yep.
And then we had engineers, we had doctors. The last case in Delhi was doctors. Now this, as I said earlier in my earlier statement, was that it is unfortunate and that we are gradually moving up the ladder in terms of the education scale and the commitment of some people in the community to activities like this. Now, educated people in a very professional setup, instead of concentrating on their work, instead of going up the ladder in the organization, they are trying to convert and influence people around them. For what? I mean, you are educated, you should be out of the bounds of such menial considerations, but that is not the case. That is why these days, whenever there is a concerted and organized effort to convert a particular or vulnerable sections of society, be it Adivasis, be it uneducated people, be it ladies, be it women, etc., everything is called a jihad. And this word has now picked up so much of coinage across the country that anything that is organized at this level and at this level of the organization is called a jihad. So whether you call it corporate jihad, it was college jihad, it was love jihad, it was things like that. And unfortunately, these cases are surfacing with a regularity which is sickening. That's why everything that is now happening in terms of conversion, whether it is even the people who are genuinely in love with each other, they are also suffering the consequences of these activities, because the society has been now drummed up to such a level of emotionality that everything that is happening is now called a jihad, and the actions and the reactions follow. And unfortunately, one more thing I would like to say, I was in one of the discussions, before your program. People are still refusing to condemn these kind of activities. They are saying that, okay, let the court case take its own pace, and then let the case be decided in the court and all that, and only then we will be condemning them. Whereas, on the other side, if there's a lynching of a Muslim fellow by a Hindu mob, immediately everybody goes, gets up and starts crying horse. Whereas in such cases, not even one sane voice comes to condemn these activities from whichever quarters who claim to be the apostles of, freedom of speech and religion, etc. But nothing comes up at all. Fair
enough, ADGP. I think you've raised another credible and important point that you've put on the table. Coming back to my earlier, understanding of young women aged 18 to 25 targeted over years, Dr. Kaur, victims often hesitate to come forward, and the ADGP has already told us that this was the first complaint. The police could only act on the complaint when it was made, and these complaints are about something that's before the ordinance took place, so they're out of that strict ordinance from the state of Maharashtra. What protections must now be urgently ensured to all the viewers, maybe some HR experts and some corporate officials that are watching this broadcast, to ensure that we prevent further silence? It's important that people come up and speak up about it.
I think it is important to sensitize Bosch to ensure that each and every employee who joins the organization is aware of the policies, not merely on any portal or in a manual, but they're taken through it so they understand that they have all the rights to speak about it. A complete process related to any complaint should be followed, principle of natural justice, so that both the parties are heard and action is taken. The action can be as severe as termination or even the cancellation of license for an organization. So these are matters which are severe in nature, and this must be made aware to all employees and businesses as well. In areas where businesses take it just as mere, a tick box, in a checklist. these situations, arise. And
but it's easier said than done, Dr. Kaur, isn't it? I mean, my apologies for interjecting here. If the HR itself is under investigation by these central agencies that are busy with anti-terrorism, those are the kind of cases that they're handling. What does it say about corporate checks and balances? Where does it leave us in this, corporate India dreams?
Which means that while the organizations are scaling up and going global, we're missing on ensuring the existence of the policies being implemented at the ground level. It clearly, reflects that. And severe action must be taken, whether punitive or exonerating, and ensure that, they're procedurally fair and therefore cannot be legally challenged in the near future, so that no such recurrence happens in the near future. And it gives, an opportunity for other organizations to learn from and ensure that they take these laws seriously in their organizations.
Najmuddin, we've covered large aspects of, what's really wrong and how deep this rot actually goes on. And it's important to continuously have these conversations. My, gratitude to all the panelists that have come out and spoken about this. But before we wrap this up, final word, Dr. Najmuddin, will this case now force companies to rethink compliance? What do you think is going to happen? Is this going to be just a 2-day headline-ridden, show, and then people just forget about it? Are India's corporate workplaces structurally equipped to prevent such abuse? This is a big company that we're talking about. There are so many small fish in the sea as well.
Corporate India today needs accountability and not these excuses. And I would say that India cannot become a global economic power if its workplace is totally unsafe, right? Yep. So growth without dignity is not progress. It's actually not the failure. This is a truth which all of us also know. And now fear-free workplace is again a fundamental right. So I would like to conclude by saying that from a very, very balanced point of view, now the focus must remain on justice and safety. And we should avoid communal polarization and sensationalization, because crime has no religion. So justice should have no bias as well. So this is something which we need to really, keep in mind. And talking about the corporate culture again, corporate is very important for us, but there are certain protocols where they fail to maintain. So now again, TCS being a very big company, they have a zero tolerance policy, no doubt about it. But having said that, when such kind of issues happen, this is not only one TCS. There can be multiple other TCS also. So furthermore, if you see in Hyderabad also, in Telangana also, the IT sector, they're planning to revive it entirely because of the case that happened in Nashik again. So they have been very careful that when such kind of issues come, they're able to, tackle it without, causing an issue to the victim or the employees working there. So I would really say that India's corporate culture needs to be revived a little more. The fact that it is not about, it's about more about accountability and not about excuses.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. This has to be an example. This has to set a precedent. This has to tell the entire, country that heads are turning on this particular case, and there needs to be more accountability, like you pointed out, Dr. Najmuddin. The investigation is, of course, going to reveal the facts, but the bigger question is already staring us in the face, and I hope we get answers to it soon. Hope that good sense prevails. If this can happen inside a top corporate setup, how safe are India's workplaces really? Many thanks for taking out the time and speaking to us here on News9. ADGP, many thanks. Dr. Najmuddin, many thanks. Dr. Kaur, always a pleasure to have you with us here on News9. All right, then we're going to slip into a quick commercial breather here. Right on the other side, the Noida workers' revolt, and who was actually at fault today.
Kushak, easy to love. Skoda. पढ़ता है, खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया.
Other see a teenage tantrum. I see you standing your